Good day, ladies and gentlemen. To help you understand why I like Batman Begins, let me enlighten you with a story. In my high school gym class, there are 3 kids I hang out with. Let's call them, I don't know, Phil, Nick, and Shane. Out of those 3 people, the one that I hang out with the most is Phil. I like him. He's funny, and he always makes me chortle. But when Phil's not there, I'll hang out with Nick. And whenever I do, I realize that Nick's not half bad. Sure, he may not be as funny or as entertaining as Phil, but he has his own qualities that set him apart. And even though Nick's overshadowed by Phil when they're together, when I think about him as an individual, I come away feeling like he doesn't get enough credit. And that's how I feel about Batman Begins. Since The Dark Knight is the best movie in the trilogy, and an overall amazing movie in general, Batman Begins is kinda left in the wayside. But if you take a look at Batman Begins as an individual movie with its own qualities, you realize that it's not that bad. And as a matter of fact, it's actually pretty dang good. By the way, Shane is the Dark Knight Rises in this scenario. You'll notice that Shane was not mentioned in my story. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, I figured that I'd take a look at Batman Begins as a movie and try to explain why I think it's actually good. And at the end of the video, I'll explain the biggest reason that I think Batman Begins is such a cinematic success, as all the cool kids are saying. So stick around. Anyway, let's get into it. Batman Begins kicks off with an 8-year-old Bruce Wayne watching his parents get gunned down in an alley. He's now an orphan, with just good old Alfred to take care of him. A decade later, he decides that he wants to become a force of justice in Gotham, to fight the corruption and evil that he sees within the city. He goes and trains with the League of Assassins, led by the mysterious Ra's al Ghul. The League's sole purpose is to topple governments and countries when they become too powerful. They take Bruce in, and he trains with some random inconspicuous man who I'm sure will not become an important character in upcoming events. He becomes a talented fighter and a brilliant thinker who learns how to conquer his fear. When Bruce finishes his training, they tell him that he is going to lead their ninja forces in toppling Gotham City because the League thinks it's a cesspool that is beyond the point of no return. Bruce, however, thinks that Gotham still has potential, so he politely declines the League's offer, and they peacefully part ways. Bruce heads back to Gotham and dons the symbol of a bat so that he can go around and inspire fear in the criminal underworld as more than a man, as a symbol. And thus, Batman is born. Why a bat, you may be asking?
That's frightened me. This time my enemies shared my dread.
Things in Gotham are worse than Bruce feared. The only good cop in the city is Officer James Gordon, so Batman lets him know that they're going to be working together. Bruce's first appearance as Batman is to go to the harbor where crime boss Carmine Falcone is receiving a shipment of drugs. Batman beats him up and leaves Falcone for the cops. However, only half of the drugs were going to the dealers. The other half went to some mysterious place, which I'm absolutely certain won't become a major plot point later on. It's the one and only Digo Double G. Anyhow, Bruce's love interest, Rachel, discovers that Jonathan Caine, a doctor specializing in fear, is using the other half of the drugs to release fear toxin, which is a compound that makes you hallucinate your worst fears into Gotham City's water line. This makes no sense, since the drugs can only be inhaled in a gaseous form, making the liquid fear toxin completely useless. Oh, Caine, you gullible fool. It appears you've screwed up worse than me downing those 12 shots of pure chocolate milk. Mistakes were made that night. That's all I'll say about it. Caine dons his alter ego, Scarecrow, and hits Rachel in the face with his fear toxin. Batman has to run in, grab Rachel, and race against time and the cops back to the Batcave to deliver the antidote to Rachel. She almost dies, but shocker, she doesn't. Bruce goes upstairs to a random party that's happening and learns that the League of Shadows is very much alive and that they are here to topple Gotham like they originally planned. The random inconspicuous man that Bruce trained with earlier in the movie is actually Ra's al Ghul. Bum bum bum. Ra's and the League burned down Bruce's house, and Alfred has to save his life. Ra's uses a device that turns liquid into gas to turn Gotham's main water supply into gas form, and since Caine has been dumping fear toxin in it for months, it's chock full of good old-fashioned terror. So it looks like Caine is a genius in this scenario, which leaves me as the freaking idiot. The city suddenly starts tearing itself apart, as everyone starts seeing ordinary people as their worst fears. Batman goes in, and with the help of Gordon, does his best to keep the city safe. He gets into a one-on-one confrontation with Ra's al Ghul himself, his old mentor, and they battle on a train that is barreling towards Wayne Tower. If it hits, then the whole city will be overcome by fear toxin. But with the help of Gordon, the train crashes with Ra's al Ghul still inside and kills him in a fiery explosion. The movie ends with Bruce taking over Wayne Enterprises and rebuilding Wayne Manor, along with acknowledging that Rachel might go out with Bruce when Batman is no longer needed in Gotham. The last scene shows Gordon and Batman meeting on a rooftop and talking about a mysterious new criminal who leaves a Joker playing card at all of his crimes. I wonder who that could possibly be. I think people tend to overlook this film because of its better and more popular counterpart, The Dark Knight, but I really love this movie. I think that the first hour of the movie is probably one of the best, if not the best, superhero origin stories I've ever seen. Obviously excluding Morbius, because come on, what man-made film could ever beat that? I think that the second half of the movie, where Scarecrow and the League of Assassins try to take over Gotham, is a little bit worse than the first half, but overall holds up. I think that there's one key thing that ties the beginning and the end together, and really makes Batman Begins a great movie, which I'll explain at the end. So stick around to hear about that. I think that an alternate movie ending which kept Scarecrow as the main main villain had potential to be way better. Don't get me wrong, the fight between Ra's al Ghul and Batman is really sick, but I think that Scarecrow is a really interesting villain, and there was a lot of potential for an awesome battle, whether it be mental or physical, or at the very least to give him a better send-off than getting tased by Rachel and getting dragged off screaming into the night. Seriously, I've seen more gracious send-offs at school expulsions. I really like the progression of the story. I think that every good superhero movie involves the hero having to grow as a person in order to defeat their villains, and Christopher Nolan does that super well in all the Dark Knight movies. Batman Begins is no exception. Bruce starts off the movie by being weaker than Ra's al Ghul, and losing to him because he couldn't keep track of his surroundings. In his final fight, Ra's is the one who didn't mind his surroundings, and paid the price for it. Just like I paid the price for all that chocolate milk. Holy cow, I've been in the bathroom for 2 hours and 45 minutes. Although, can I just say that Batman's logic when it comes to killing someone makes no sense. If someone is trapped on a train going hundreds of miles per hour, and you choose not to save them, you're basically killing them. This is the equivalent of seeing someone hanging onto a twig hundreds of feet above the ground and walking away. Yes, they could theoretically save themselves or survive the fall, but come on, you know they're not gonna. On a more positive note though, Bruce's inner struggle and feelings regarding fear, justice, and revenge are all beautifully well done. His journey with fear in particular is an expertly designed trip. It starts with his fear of bats, based off of a traumatic experience as a child, and then because he believes that his fear of bats led to his parents' death, he then also fears not making his parents proud, or not living up to his parents' legacy. He then resolves both of these things by facing his fear and turning it into a weapon to use against his enemies, and by bringing back some form of justice to Gotham. He believes that his parents will be proud of him and what he's doing to help people that are otherwise unable to help themselves. On a more superficial level, the acting is actually really good all around. I'm biased because I love Christian Bale, and I think that he's by far the best Batman and the best Bruce Wayne, but right next to that, Cillian Murphy delivers an amazing performance as Scarecrow. He really emphasizes how Scarecrow makes himself feel powerful by making others feel afraid, and brings that to life in the character. He's also got some absolute bangers when it comes to facial expressions. Holy guacamole, he looks more surprised than me when I learned that chocolate milk doesn't come from chocolate cows. Like, how does that even work? Like, I trusted science up until this point in my life. Looks like I gotta hit up Bill Nye again tonight. Michael Caine will always be the one true Alfred to me, and Gary Oldman is far and away the best Jim Gordon in any Batman universe. Liam Neeson is pretty good as Ra's al Ghul, but honestly, as a villain, he just can't compete with Cillian Murphy. But I mean, come on, how's good old Liam supposed to compete with this? I mean, it's just not fair at this point. I think my only complaint about the acting in this movie was Katie Holmes. She's not terrible, but she's so forgettable, and it's a good thing she didn't come back in the sequel, because Maggie Gyllenhaal is such a better Rachel. When it comes to the plot of this movie, I also got some problems with that. In the beginning of the movie, before he's received any training from the League of Assassins, Bruce is in a prison, and somehow he beats up like 8 burly men before the guards drag him away. Where did he possibly get this level of fighting skill? The guards literally lock him in a stone cell because, quote, it's for the protection of the other prisoners. You don't achieve that level of fighting proficiency by going to karate from 6 to 8 on Tuesday nights. Also, how is there a full-scale water poisoning operation happening in the basement of Arkham Asylum without anyone finding out about it? Arkham is a credible mental institution in this universe, and they're just turning a blind eye to the mass poisoning happening in their cellar. And finally, this isn't so much a bad plot point as it is just annoying, but for some reason, Christopher Nolan felt the need to make every fight scene shakier than my legs when I'm running from an angry mob. I know that the movie was trying to show us how Batman looked through the eyes of his victims, since the main theme of this movie was fear, but I think that universally, we just wanted to see Batman absolutely pop off. However, the story does a great job of setting Bruce up as a person trying to learn as much as he can about the nature of right and wrong, how he became a criminal himself, how he got into the mindset of a criminal, and how he truly tried to understand what is morally good and bad. This is the most character building we've ever seen in a live-action Batman movie, and probably any live-action superhero movie ever. Also, it's really cool how Nolan made Bruce go against everything that the League of Shadows stood for, and yet still had him incorporate the lessons that they taught him into his fight against crime. By the way, I've just realized that this entire video I've been saying the League of Assassins instead of the League of Shadows the whole time, so just disregard every single League of Assassins reference and replace it with League of Shadows. I haven't the foggiest idea why this little slip-up happened. Anyway, moving on. Another great element of the story itself is how Bruce got all of his equipment. Theoretically, if you have workers, designers, manufacturers, and producers for all of your gear and equipment, then it stands to reason that sooner or later, one of them would blow the whistle on you. Batman Begins takes care of this problem by having there be one man in charge, Lucius Fox. Finally, the one thing that you've all been waiting for that I think makes this film work so well is that it's not just a great superhero film, but a great film in general. It's a very realistic take on Batman, with all the villains being skilled or smart, and Batman himself being a mere man. It has a good grasp on human emotions and psychology, along with humans at their worst and best. And most importantly, it has a great, enthralling story. I think that's a big problem that we have with superhero movies these days. Big companies and producers scrounge through comics and lore to find a superhero who hasn't had a live-action appearance yet, and then write the story after finding the character. Like, come on. Does anyone actually expect something like this to be a truly phenomenal story?
Cosmic.
Nolan does the exact opposite. He recognized that to make a really popular Batman movie, he had to start off with a great story. Sure, he had a big name behind it, which no doubt helped its success, but one of the reasons that I think the story is good is that Batman is not a crucial factor. The main character could have been a simple cop, and it still would have worked really well. Because at the end of the day, this movie is less about a superhero who has a story, and more of a movie about a story that involves a superhero. It has a great main character. It has amazing side characters for the hero to lean back on. The protagonist has interesting, realistic motivations. It has love, action, adventure, and loyalty. But it also has great villains. It has great characters to support the things that the hero stands against. It has a main antagonist who genuinely believes what he's doing is right and thinks that he knows best. And it has despair, anger, guilt, loss, and hardship. It shows the best and worst in humanity, the peak of human ingenuity, and the valleys of human greed and corruption. It shows the effect kindness and mercy can have, and it displays the levels of cruelty and hate that people will turn to. And look, this movie will always be overshadowed by its sequel, The Dark Knight. And hey, deservedly so. The Dark Knight is just a better movie by far. But the whole point of this video was to get some recognition for Batman Begins, and the excellent work of Christopher Nolan. So hats off to you, Big C, you've done it again. Since you're watching this, then I can almost guarantee that you've seen Matt Reeves' The Batman. Check out my review of that right here, cause hot take, I didn't think it was that great. Anyway, subscribe if you enjoyed and leave a comment saying what you'd like to see me review next.